Welcome back to the Mark Moses Show, only right here on Sports Radio 95.9 The Fan. And right now here on the Club 52 hotline, a good friend of mine from the great state of Texas covers college football for BleacherReport.com. His name is Ben Kercheval. We got to talk about these latest standings with the 14 playoffs. So, Ben, how you doing today, man?
I'm good. How about you?
Hey, you know I live in the Sunshine State, so we're a little angry with Florida State being number 3. I know the rest of the country doesn't care, but do people just not love the champ? What's going on here with Florida State?
Well, the rationale is that Oregon to date has done more in the win column than Florida State. You know, the Ducks have that one loss to Arizona, but look, whether you agree or disagree with the decision to move Oregon up a spot over Florida State, I think it's an interesting and kind of refreshing take that they're not just looking at wins versus losses by themselves, right? Just because you're undefeated doesn't necessarily guarantee you one of those top 2 spots. Now, in the very small, in one way to look at it is if Oregon and Florida State were to finish 2 or 3 respectively, however they rank it, it really wouldn't change anything, right? Because they would probably still play in Pasadena at the Rose Bowl, something like that. The matchup itself would not change. The only thing that really changes are the standings. So if you're Florida State, I would probably be more concerned about being the number 1 overall seed and maybe having a chance to play in the Sugar Bowl a little bit closer to Tallahassee. That would be the only thing that I would be worried about if I was Florida State, not necessarily moving down from 2 to 3. So it's an interesting way to kind of go about it. I think if we were under the BCS system, it would be pretty clear cut because as long as there were 2 undefeated teams among Power 5 conferences, then their path to that championship game would be pretty clear, right? And then everyone else would just be sort of waiting in the wings, hoping to either, upset one of those teams or hoping for a loss in, some way, somehow. And then from there, you have to kind of jockey for position and kind of see how everything shakes out. So I think Florida State has had a couple of good wins. I think the Clemson win is good. The Notre Dame win is good. Clearly the selection committee feels that they're pretty high on the Pac-12 as a whole. I think UCLA moving up to number 11, number 12 shows a lot about how, what they think about the Bruins and what they think about Pac-12, Arizona State in there as well. So they're putting a lot of emphasis, I think, on that conference. And so then when you add up those wins that Oregon has, I think they feel like they've done more. So I understand that, if you start at number 1 and then over the course of the season you're moving down to number 2, moving down to number 3, I understand that it gets frustrating. I think with this latest move, if I were a Florida State fan, I would probably not actually be that concerned.
We're here with Ben Kercheval, Bleacher Report, talking college football. Great answer right there. Now, here's my take. I think ESPN and the selection committee was like, wait a minute, no one's talking about us. This is kind of... people don't care. So let's just mess it up and say this and this and this, and now people will start talking about us. I mean, can't you make a legitimate case for that?
If that's the case, then I think we have bigger problems than where they rank. if they're gonna give in to that kind of pressure, if they're gonna do things just to do things, then we have a major problem on our hands.
That's great, man. What's so great about Mississippi State? Because I cover the SEC and I completely forgot why they're a great team. Because everyone's like, oh, well, they're number 1. You can't even challenge this. What's so great about them? I forget after a while.
I'm not sure. They haven't played real well as of late. And it was interesting to me because when Florida State struggled earlier in the season, didn't always play real well. And Florida State's a really good team when they're on. When they're not on, and they only play about 25, 30 minutes of really great football a game. But when they're on, they're great. When they're not on, they look pretty beatable. And a couple weeks ago, we saw Florida State move down to number 2 because, well, we don't think Florida State's the best team in the country. All right, that's fair enough. But I think over the last few weeks, Mississippi State hasn't looked all that great either, but we haven't seen them move down in the same way. For me, my personal top 4 was Florida State number 1, Mississippi State number 2, Oregon number 3, and TCU number 4. If Mississippi State beats Alabama, then I don't think there's going to be any question about it. If Mississippi State doesn't beat Alabama, then I think it becomes a really interesting topic and a really interesting discussion because their best win is going to be over Auburn. And really, and LSU, kind of. But then after that, you look, and all of a sudden they're non-conference slate. No one ever talks. Like, people talk about how bad Baylor's non-conference slate is. Mississippi State isn't really a whole lot better. It's just that no one ever really talks about that. But I think that does become a topic of discussion if Mississippi State loses. So I think that game between Mississippi State and Alabama, regardless of who wins or who loses, like especially if it's close, that has a ton of ramifications and playoff implications. I think probably more than any other game this weekend.
Yeah, I agree with you. Ben Kercheval, Bleacher Report, joining us here on the Club 52 hotline. Could you make a case also that Dak Prescott wins or loses the Heisman Trophy this weekend at Tuscaloosa?
I think he probably has a chance to win it more than he has a chance to lose it. Because right now, Mariota is my number one guy. It seems like this is Mariota's Heisman to lose, and then there's just kind of everybody else. That's just how I feel. Maybe some people feel differently. Prescott's been great this year. I think he has probably more to gain than he has to lose. I think it would be the opposite if he was the clear front runner. I don't think that's the case.
In recent memory, I've never remembered a year where we really don't talk about the Heisman race. And you look at the calendar, we're almost done with the regular season in November. Can you remember? Because we had Johnny Football, we had RG3, Mark Ingram. I haven't heard anyone even debate it on any show. What about you?
It has been kind of a quiet year for the Heisman. I would agree with that. And it's kind of interesting that you bring that up because sometimes I get asked about it, but by and large, it's not really much of a topic of discussion. So it's an interesting point that you bring up because you're right. I haven't heard that much about it, and I don't know if that's because Mariota again is kind of the foregone conclusion that he's going to win it, or what it is. I think part of it might be, this is just a guess, but I think part of it might be that there's a little bit of a bleed over from the fact that there really isn't a great team out there. Like, there are a lot of really good football teams, but there's not a Florida State from last year, right? Just totally steamrolling people by 40 points. And Jameis Winston happened to be on that team. And so I don't know. You're right. It's been kind of a weird season in that sense. I also think it's generally sort of wide open where, I think Mario is a front runner, but there are half a dozen guys or so who are all kind of interchangeable. And it always kind of comes down to a quarterback race, which I tend to hate.
I agree.
Yeah, but I'd love to see, I think Amari Cooper's in there. I think Amir Abdullah's in there, Melvin Gordon. I think Shaq Thompson needs far more consideration than he's getting.
We're at Ben Kercheval, Bleacher Report. I got to get your take on the Florida Gators because I had you on a couple weeks ago, and I think we both agreed that Muschamp might not be the coach anymore. But now they make a quarterback change. They beat Georgia. I think he's coming back next year. Now, maybe he's horrible against South Carolina, and that changes the boat, but I think he might be the coach in 2015. What about you, Ben?
It's amazing what a game will do, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing what a game will do. You put up 418 rushing yards on Georgia. Next thing you know, the whole narrative has shifted. Yeah, if he gets back to a postseason game, if he gets Florida back to a bowl, then I think he comes back. South Carolina's not a very good football team, especially on defense. And so if they can beat South Carolina, I think the only game really they have left is I think they still have Vanderbilt left to play.
No, Eastern Kentucky. No, don't worry about it, man. They beat Vandy. They got Eastern Kentucky, who's like 8-1, and then they got FSU.
Yeah. So if they can get back to a bowl game, then yeah, I think he returns. It probably buys him one more year.
It's unbelievable. What about Michigan? How come they don't even have a quarterback? I mean, what is that a 5-year project? What's the future of that football team now?
Well, they don't have an offensive line. and they've done that goes back to about 2011 when they just didn't really recruit that area like they needed to, and they didn't develop guys like they needed to. And look, Devin Gardner is probably he's not the answer, period. But I don't think obviously it would make a difference if Shane Morris was back there because there's just been absolutely no protection. They actually have a really talented group of running backs, but you never hear about them because there's never any room for them, right? And Devin Funchess is a really great receiving weapon, but they don't really have much beyond that. And defense is actually not bad, but no one ever really talks about defense, and they certainly don't talk about it when your offense is a mess like it is. So I think the fact that they haven't been able to develop an offensive line is real problematic for them, and that is something that just takes time. So you get Doug Nussmeier in there. He's had success everywhere he's been. Well, he can't do anything with this offense. Well, guess what? That's not a Doug Nussmeier. That's not his problem, right? It's not like he suddenly forgot how to call plays. So, yeah, to me, Michigan is a project, and in the same way that Texas is kind of a project. You wouldn't think that it is, but Ohio State is obviously rolling. Like, you want to talk about a great development project? Look at what Ohio State has done on offense this year. Mm-hmm. Developing that offensive line, J.T. Barrett went in and put a smackdown on Michigan State. Now, beyond that game, Michigan State's done a really good job of getting players, mostly 3- and 4-star guys, and developing them as well. So in addition to Michigan not doing its job, you've had some of those other Big Ten teams around them go and do what they're supposed to do. And so it's been a pretty lethal combination for them.
I got to end with this. You talk about Ohio State. I want them to take on Nebraska with one loss. Like, I know Bo Pelini, he'll shoot himself in the foot, lose to Wisconsin, but I'm praying that those two teams meet in Indianapolis. And don't you feel like the winner of that game should have a legitimate shot at going to the 14 playoff?
I think that's what the Big Ten should want, right? They should want Ohio State and Nebraska with one loss apiece to play because that's probably your best chance for either team to add one more really good win to that resume. It's kind of funny. No one's really talking about Nebraska.
No.
They're not, and they're just sitting there at one loss. One loss is to Michigan State. All right, not bad. Nothing wrong with that. Beat Miami in non-conference play, which Hurricanes are good, not great, but it's a pretty decent win. They close out with a pretty intriguing schedule. You mentioned Wisconsin this weekend. I think they still have to play Minnesota. I think they still have to play Iowa, too. Again, good, not great, but enough to kind of build up some solid wins because that's what they don't have in Big Ten Conference play right now is any good wins. It'd be like Purdue, Northwestern, Illinois, and like Rutgers. So if they get to the Big Ten championship game, and let's say they beat Ohio State, you're looking at a 12-1 team whose only loss is to Michigan State. So to me, they're one of those teams that's just kind of sitting there very quietly with a chance to really make a great run at the end of the season. Ohio State is an interesting team to me because I don't know of any team that would want to play the Buckeyes right now. They're just playing so well. That being said, no one can ever really fully ignore that Virginia Tech loss, especially given the fact that the Hokies have just gone belly up since then. That is probably going to weigh them down. But I think they're an interesting team and an interesting case study in how much stock, if any, does the selection committee put into how much Ohio State has improved and not necessarily hold it against them that Virginia Tech hasn't held up their end of the deal, right? Ohio State can't control that. All they can do is control how much better they get, and they clearly have.
Great stuff. Ben Kercheval, Bleacher Report. Are you ready for the stretch run? I could tell, man. Are you ready for the next 3 weeks?
Gearing up, man. It's a lot of coffee, but it's good, man. I know the playoffs are supposed to ruin the regular season, but it's made it so much better. And I think the fact that there are no really great teams in college football this year, it's just made things a lot more exciting, and we're entering a really critical stretch where I don't think anybody's safe. I don't even think Florida State's safe.
No, it's that idea of, okay, we have 4 spots, but there's 5 power conferences. That's the part that just drives everyone crazy. Ben, thank you so much for coming on, and I hope I can get you on again.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.